Hi everyone. Today I'm going to focus on the Toyota 4Runner, specifically on the 4th gen. I'm going to do a number of these videos that actually capture various Toyota products, primarily ranging from the late 90s up to modern day, which is right now 2025. The first one that we're going to talk about is the 2003 to 2009 Toyota 4Runner. It's called the 4th gen. Obviously, the reason it's called the 4th generation, there were three prior and there's two post, with the 5th gen being the most selling between 2010 and 2024. Now, as far as how I'm going to look at this, I'm going to break everything down into various sections. I'm going to do a section on highlights and lowlights, a technical breakdown going through engines and everything that were available. And then I'm also going to go through the different model years, some of the changes that occurred. And then last but not least, I'll give you my opinion on what I personally would select. And then if I were going to build it for off-roading, what would I do? So without further ado, the 4th Gen 4Runner is often called the ugly duckling of the Toyota 4Runner community. Reason for that, most people find the design to be a bit bulbous, it lacked character, and it was generally speaking not a fan favorite. For me personally, it was my favorite as it's what I grew up with. It was also the only 4Runner that ever offered a V8. All of that said, I do think that the hate that the 4th Gen 4Runner does get is not necessarily correct, and I don't think that you would ever be making a mistake by buying one. Now, as far as the broadest highlights, I hit on the absolute biggest one here. The V8, the 2UZ-FE, the 4.7 liter V8 that's also found in the Sequoia, the Tundra, and the overall Land Cruiser in the North American market, is a fantastic motor. Those are million-mile motors. I can do an entire video specifically on that engine. That is my favorite engine that was ever produced. It also has the highest towing capacity of any Toyota 4Runner that has ever been produced, including the new iForce Max 4Runners that are out there. Next, prices on these guys are pretty cheap. You can generally find, especially if you're looking for a V6 and you're not as concerned with the torque, you can find these pretty easily for between $6,000 and $8,000. If you're trying to find a specialty iteration of it, yes, they can go up to maybe 20, but that's going to be about the cleanest example of a V8 limited that you can possibly find. The market these days dictates pretty low pricing. Next, modern feeling. So the 4th gen and the 5th gen, again, 5th gen was produced from 2010 to 2024, are built on the same overall chassis. While there are fundamental differences between the two of them, the 4th gen feels very modern. It's not a vehicle that feels like it was designed 30 years ago. You can easily sit in it in 2025 and think, okay, it's a few years old, but it doesn't feel old. The 3rd gen 4Runners feel old, and they are anemic by their own, imagination. All right, next for highlights is going to be the aftermarket support. Aftermarket support for the 4th gens is frankly out of this world. Parts are not that expensive. You can basically do anything in the world that you could ever desire with them. You can lift them, you name it, you can do it. Moving into some of the lowlights. Design. This is going to be subjective. Most people find that the design of the 4th gen is not very appealing. I am in the other side of the camp that disagrees with that fact. I think it's a good looking car. I think it's very simple. Next, the V6, and I'm probably going to get some hate for this. The V6, especially in the early ones, can have issues with head gasket failure. Generally speaking, this happens later in life. Most of what I see in the community is between probably 150 and 250,000 miles. What generally happens, I don't know if it was the head gasket material that was used originally, but the earlier ones do tend to go, and it's not unheard of for that to happen, especially at higher miles. Moving to something a little bit less extreme, dash cracking. Dash cracking can occur very, very commonly on these. That's where heat or extreme cold can basically melt or just overall crack that dash design. It is a rubber mat sort of feeling thing, so it is not going to last very well. The 5th gen was much better designed in that respect. Next, frankly, this should probably be number 1. And this applies to all Toyotas that are body on frame. That is rust. Do not buy a Northern, 4Runner, or any Toyota product. You will hate it forever. Every rust or every bolt will have rust on it. They are not fun to deal with. It is not a fun design. Do not buy a rusty, crusty 4Runner or Toyota product for that matter. Last but not least, I'm going to list out the X-Reyes suspension. X-Reyes suspension was only available on the Sport Edition trim. It was not on any of the others. Frankly, at this point, all the suspension components should probably be replaced on a 20-year-old vehicle. But if for whatever reason they haven't, the X-Reyes system, which is hydraulically linked from, I think it's actually front corner to back corner, can leak, can go out. It's just not a good system long-term in that vehicle. Transitioning from highlights and lowlights, let's look at the technical breakdown now. All right. 4th Gen 4Runner was produced from 2003 to 2009 with a facelift in 2006. All years were offered with 2 engines. Those 2 engines were the 1GR, which is a 4-liter V6. That same V6 in a slightly different iteration was used all the way through the 5th Gen's entire life cycle until 2024. It is a damn near bulletproof engine outside of the early head gasket issues that I mentioned. There's a reason that they kept it around for the next 15 years after this generation died. The other engine option is going to be the 2UZ FE. That is a 4.7 liter V8. Now, all 4th Gen V6s are not going to have variable valve timing, meaning they do produce a little bit less power than the V6, or than the 5th Gen V6. The 2UZ FE did make a power difference in the 2006 model year. They added variable valve timing. They produced, I want to say it was about 20 or 30 more foot-pounds of torque, and the horsepower was about the same. The power you can feel. Is it going to be hugely significant? No. I've owned both. Personally, I like the simplicity of not having it. It is what it is. You can do the little SAIS bypass if the system has a problem, but generally speaking, pick whatever you like. Now, as far as the 4.7, it does require a little bit more maintenance. You're going to hear this from everybody in the group, and frankly, it's perfectly fine. You have to replace your timing belt and water pump every 90,000 miles or every 10 years. If you buy a 4Runner or anything with that motor that has 80,000 miles and it's 20 years old, do the timing belt. Immediately do the timing belt. I don't care what you read online. They are interference motors. You will blow the engine up. It's not worth it. Now, as far as the transmission, this is kind of a weird one. If you get a 2003, this is only for 2003. In 2003, and you got a V6, you got the 4-speed out of the 3rd Gen 4Runner. If I was buying one of these, I would not buy one with that transmission. There is nothing inherently wrong with it. However, you do lack a gear, and it's not going to be great. 5 is already questionably enough. 4 I just wouldn't elect to have. If you have any other model year or you have the V8 in 2003, you either have the Aisin A750E, which is the 2-wheel drive transmission, or you have the A750F, which is the 4-wheel drive transmission. They're both very good transmissions, and they use both of those all the way through the 5th Gen. I have read very, very few failures on these. The other common call out with that transmission, do not do a flush on those transmissions. You are making a huge mistake. They are lifetime fluid. I do not think it should be lifetime fluid. You can circulate that fluid out and do a drain infill, but never do a full flush. You will shock the transmission, it will fail, and then you'll be very upset. The only time that I read about these transmission failures is from people going, I flushed my transmission, and they subsequently had a transmission failure. Do not do that. All right, moving into model years and some of the differences. I'm going to make one more statement before I transition into that. The 4-wheel drive systems. There were 2 separate 4-wheel drive systems. The V6 4-wheel drive is a selectable 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive transfer case with 4-low. If you get the V8, regardless of trim, doesn't matter if it's sport, limited, SR5, doesn't matter. It is always going to be a full-time four-wheel drive V8. It's the exact same setup that the GX470 had. Ironic that they picked those between the two. That's how you know. All right, now for model year differences, 2003 to 2005. Most of the time, these are going to be the years that people don't necessarily love. They had a slightly squared off front end. The fenders were also squared off, easiest way to tell on those. The taillights were also LEDs in the later years, while they were incandescent bulbs in the earlier years. The biggest callouts are just going to be the early V6s do have issues with head gaskets potentially at higher miles. And that 03 model year, you do get the 4-speed transmission if you get, the V6. Now, moving to 06 to 09, that's when you get your variable valve timing, so you do get that bump in the V8. That is only for the V8, not for the V6. The available trims are going to be the SR5, the Sport, the Limited, and then for the final 2 model years, there was an Urban Runner that was available in 2008. It was mostly an accessory package. And then the very, very special one, technically, is going to be a formal Trail Edition. The Trail Edition is the only 4th Gen 4Runner that was ever offered with a factory rear locker. I don't believe that it had crawl control, but if somebody corrected me on that and told me otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily fight it. I don't know that I've ever even seen one of these. They're very rare. I believe there were only in fact, I wrote it down. In 2009, there were only 19,675 4Runners that were sold, period. So of that, it was probably 1,000 or 1,500 would actually be that Trail Edition with the V6. It'd be a very, very hard spec to find if you could find it. Now, I prefer the styling of the later ones. You get that rounded off on the fender. You get a slightly more round on the front grille. I find that it looks a little bit better. Now, I'm going to move on. So now that we've covered our years, I would move into what I would buy. So I've actually owned 3 separate 4th gens over the years. I'll go through what I paid for them because it was almost a joke. I had a 2005 Limited V8 4-wheel drive that I paid $4,000 for with a bad power steering pump. Put a new power steering pump, really enjoyed the car for a few months, ended up selling it. Bought another one. It was a 2006 SR5 V8 4-wheel drive. This one was actually in salsa red. I paid $7,000 for that car. I love the color red. I actually loved that vehicle. I had my LX 570 at the time, so it didn't make sense to keep it. But that was probably my favorite vehicle I've ever had in my driveway. The last one that I had was a 2004 SR5 V6 2-wheel drive. This vehicle had 396,000 miles on it. I paid $2,500 for the vehicle. It was a one-owner car. It was outside of the seat, making my back need to recover from sitting in it just from the foam being gone. It was in incredible shape. No accidents, no rust. Beautiful car. If I had my pick on what I could just go out and buy, and I almost did it a few months ago. I elected not to because I picked a 5th gen. I will cover that in another video as to why I did that. If I had to pick, though, I would go for an 06 to 09. The color that I would pick is the Shadow Mica color. I would have to do a V8. I would have to do a 4-wheel drive. I would like it to be the Sport Edition. The Sport Edition had a slightly different roof rack, as well as factory sliders. I found that it looked the most aggressive, and it was just the one that best suited what I wanted to do with it. Now, as far as what mods I would do to this, I personally have a pretty good flavor, and I know what I like to do. I immediately on day one, it's the same thing I did to my 5th gen, I would do a Dobinson's 3.5-inch IMS lift with JBA upper control arms. Those are the best upper control arms, not SBCs. They're cheap Chinesium crap. And then you have Super Pro lower control arms, which are from Australia and also very good. The Super Pros are actually interesting because they're polyurethane bushings. So your feel through that is actually very good. And the IMS, the way that Dobinson's IMS actually feels when you're driving it, it's pretty tight. With that lift setup, your truck will feel pretty darn impressive on actually going through turns, which I love. Now, as far as tire size, some people may elect to go slightly larger. I would go for a 285 7017. That's a 33, technically a 32.8, I believe. I would select Falcon Wild PKT4Ws. I've had those on a couple of cars now. They rock, for lack of any other words. I love the look of the front bumper. I would not change it out. I would do a hidden winch front bumper, hidden winch front bumper. I would do a transmission cooler, make sure that these transmissions stay cool. I do have a boat. I want to make sure that it's staying nice and cool, regardless of whether I'm towing or it's 110 degrees in Atlanta. As far as the locker situation, obviously 4th gen V8s are not going to have the locker. That was only a trail edition. That was only on the V6. And that was only a very special edition. I would go ARB on a rear locker. If I elected to go for a front, great. I've read mixed things about the front clamshell. I probably would just do a rear. That's expensive. When it comes to the interior, I would do a leather conversion because those seats are not going to have held up. Go ahead and account for doing that. Next is going to be the head unit. The head unit, I don't care if you have the TomTom or what you have, it is bad. They don't have a backup camera. I would go ahead and just swap that out and make it feel like it's actually in the modern era. And then last but not least, and this one is because I know what I like, an FJ Cruiser 2-wheel drive transfer case. That doesn't mean you don't have 4-wheel drive. It's a selectable 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, and 4-low transfer case. There's a lot of guys in the community now that are doing this within different car groups, different vehicles. They're doing it to the Sequoias that I've seen, the 4Runners that I've seen, and the GX470s that I've seen. I really enjoy off-roading in 2-wheel drive. I obviously enjoy 4 high and 4 low when I need it, but it's more fun to actually try and create a challenge for yourself on some easier trails than it is to just easily go through everything. That was a huge proponent of why I picked the 5th gen. Now, the last thing that I'll do is the scoring for the vehicle. I'm going to do this for all of them that I cover. That's going to incorporate the vehicle's cost, the aftermarket support, the daily ability, the reliability, and the overall prowess of the chassis. For this one, the vehicle cost, I would put it at a 5. As far as value for what you're getting a V8 put into a 4Runner, which is already the perfect size vehicle, and they're generally available from like $8,000 to $12,000, maybe $14,000. Is that a lot of money for a vehicle with 200,000 miles? Yes. But as I tell everybody, it's not a normal vehicle, so long as it doesn't have rust. Aftermarket support, I'm going to go with a 4. I think that the 5th gen is going to offer a bit more flexibility. I think an FJ Cruiser is going to offer a bit more. And honestly, I think the Lexus market now may offer a little bit more too. It's still very, very good. The parts are relatively inexpensive, but I would probably say that there are slightly better options if you're going to go that route. As far as daily ability, you're not getting any blind spot monitoring. You're not getting, any cross collision traffic control or whatever it is. It's going to be a bit hit or miss there. I would give it probably a 3 out of 5. Reliability, and I'm going to struggle on this one. I'm going to call it a 4 out of 5. The earlier 4th gens with those V6s can suffer. I've seen more than enough of them within the community. It's not a reason to total out the vehicle, but I do think it's probably like a 4 out of 5. If you have the 2UZ, I think you probably have a 5 out of 5. Or if you have a later V6. Last but not least is going to be prowess. Based on the subjectiveness and the design of the vehicle, I have to rate this pretty low. For me personally, I love seeing a nicely built 4th gen. I would give it a 5 out of 5. But I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's going to stick out to most people. I love how they look. I love how they drive. But again, it's going to be subjective. That would give it an overall score of 18 out of 25. The single greatest thing I can say for this chassis, it may be the ugly duckling, but they do an incredible job of holding up these days and providing a fantastic entry point into the off-roading community. If you want to get in, find a V8, find a 4-wheel drive. There is no more fun that you can possibly have than getting one of those. Thank you.